So what actually happens if you put a orc or an olog in a pit fight and they manage to survive? If both contestants manage to survive for the time limit that is there. Let's delve into that. So essentially what happens is if they're both able to survive, number one, they could gain traits from it and or abilities from it and different things along those lines. They could also potentially gain mounts depending on what happened to them in battle. So for instance, if you sit here and you have a guy that goes in and he sits here and gets burned multiple times, but he still comes out alive, he could gain the ability to be fireproof. He could be immune to fire, he could hate fire, he could be scared of fire, different things on those lines. So that factors into every single thing. If you have a guy that goes in and a guy has a Caragor as a mount, he could potentially become a Caragor Slayer, a Beast Slayer, and or he could become and have a fear of Caragors, different things like that. Now, what actually happens when the timer hits 0? When the timer hits 0, both contestants, it is a draw, and they both still remain in the pit fight for you to go down there and see them both. They may continue fighting each other, or they may just stand there and do nothing, but when it comes down to it, it's a draw. You gain XP from this, they gain some experience from this, and overall they can gain, like I said, traits and abilities from this encounter. They could also become that person or they could also become that orc or olog's rival, as well as maybe possibly, you know, they're, oh hey, I don't like this guy, I'm just going to take him out right now. So there's different things like that. They both stand there. Now what about Overlord pit fights? Overlord pit fights, if it goes down to the wire and actually hits 0, it's a draw, and both are returned to their respective fortresses in the player's overall fortress. So yes, when it comes down to it, Overlords kind of don't get the same thing, but they can still gain traits and abilities, I believe, from it. I believe, don't quote me on that, but I think they still can. But when it comes down to it, your overall people who are outside, your defenders of the fort, different things like that, that you put in pit fights, people that you actually put in pit fights, if it comes down to a draw, it affects your character. And not only does it affect your character, it also affects the enemy they were facing. If your guy goes in here and has the ability to raise the dead, and at the end of the fight, they're still alive, that guy that he was facing, that was the enemy, you know, orc or olog, could potentially now be afraid of the undead. And or he could be enraged by the undead. So there's different things like that. It really helps evolve the character and help the character kind of go through their progression. And when I say character, I mean like your branded character, as in like your orc or olog, go through their progression and stuff like that. But they have to survive. That's the biggest issue of it. There's less than 4% of there actually being a draw in the game. And since the game has been out, I've only witnessed 2 draws. So that's what happens if you pit 2 people in a pit fight and they both wind up essentially winning and the timer hits 0 and neither one can kill each other.